All right, welcome back to the PHLY Sixers Podcast. I'm Derek Bodner, joined this time by Kyle Neubeck. How you doing, Kyle?
I am hanging in, Derek. It is a late September Friday.
It is.
We are only this show away from Media Day and the start of training camp and actual Sixers things happening. So I think you and I have been looking at this show specifically. It's like, this is the marker. We made it through the worst part of the off season. And now it's go time. We're going to be full time on the grounds. Going to be out in Colorado next week. And so I'm pretty fired up, honestly.
Yeah, no, it is. This is our last show before Media Day on Monday. We will be having a show after Media Day, so we will react to that. And then we'll be off to Colorado for training camp in Fort Collins. I want to thank Nick Nurse for picking that location. Easy to get to, not inconvenient at all. Actually, I'm looking forward to it. I've been in Denver. I've never been anywhere in Colorado outside of Denver, so I'm looking forward to exploring it a little bit, even though our schedule is pretty packed. But it will be great this is the last show where I feel like we have to come up with a topic for at least a little while, because after that we will have stuff.
Can you guys believe it? Derek and I have actually had to do work over the last
we've had to do
weeks.
15 hours of podcasting when nothing has changed. I'm just looking forward to something changing, something to analyze, some new information to come out. It'll be great.
Yeah, so great. I see what's up to Will, what's up to Randy. Ishmael is very depressed and concerned about saying they're not going to be able to acquire Drew Holiday. I would say I'm not as pessimistic as
No,
Ishmael
I wouldn't
is.
make them the favorite, but I think there's certainly a chance. And I certainly think there is an appetite from the Sixers' perspective to try. It's just, will they have the most to offer? Will they have the biggest bid to make?
For sure. And I would say, to follow up on your Colorado point, that's my first time ever in Colorado this coming week. So I'm looking forward to coming back with takes about how overrated the altitude thing is. Okay. Knowing that I'm not going to be doing any kind of physical activity.
I was going to say, are we going to go on a jog and compare it to what we normally do? How do we do that?
Yeah, listen, I'm getting in.
Is it going to be tougher to do an hour of podcasting out there? Or are we judging it by that?
That's something we're only going to know once we get there. But
as Kyle mentioned, you can, if you want to interact with us during the show, go subscribe, hit the bell notification, get notifications on YouTube. There is a live chat component to this show. We do try to pick out some comments and some questions from there. Also, we will probably have some time towards the end of it. So if you are currently in the chat, please do leave us a question. We will see if we have time at the end to address that. So I guess, like we alluded to, this is our last show before we actually get information to discuss. Outside of maybe a Kelly Oubre signing, there hasn't been direct Sixers news. That changes very quickly. So we kind of wanted this to be sort of a recap, some of the major storylines we're looking forward to coming into training, or Media Day, coming into training camp. And it would be tough to start anywhere else other than, does James Harden show up on Monday? And if he does, how does his teammates and coach react? And if he doesn't, how do they react?
Yeah, so I would say at this point, signs are pointing, or it's trending toward James won't be there at Media Day. I think if he's not there, I wouldn't expect him to just drop in Fort Collins, Colorado. That just doesn't, it seems like it's either one or the other. Either he shows up, he lights everybody on fire at Media Day, is a pain in the ass in Colorado, or he just decides, I'm kind of hanging out and doing my own thing for the time being. And I know that there are some reports out there that people don't think he's coming. I don't think anyone really knows. You could say, I have my instinct of what I think is going to happen. I have what people have told me. But I think, as James Harden has shown, he is not the normal trade requester. As we said on the show, the best to ever unlace the shoes. So that's step number one. Step number two is the fallout from that. And I guess we'll call them the side characters in the James Harden saga. I think you and I have talked a lot this week, Derek, about PJ Tucker and maybe what he says at Media Day on Monday, because not only has he spoken out for James publicly this summer, essentially taking his side, I also think there's the angle of he's been thrown in a lot of these trade rumors, right?
Yep.
There's been a suggestion that perhaps if James is moved, PJ goes with him, and it's almost a package deal. So how PJ feels about Daryl specifically, how he feels about the situation. And, is he coming here with a professional approach? Because when James left Houston, PJ was left behind for a little bit, and I certainly think he was not on
Wasn't the best stretch of PJ's career.
Yeah, it was not the best that PJ has ever played or the most professional run of his career when James left Houston and went to Brooklyn. So I think PJ, honestly, is one of the people I really want to talk to the most on Monday. And honestly, we'll probably have as much insight into this whole thing as anybody.
Yeah, it'll be great to get his perspective on it because, how much does he side with Harden or how much is he just kind of ride or die with Harden?
Yeah.
If you had to, PJ right now, up to this point in his career, has made $68 million. How much of that do you think you can directly attribute to James Harden creating corner threes? Probably at least half of it. Like he's made last 6 or 7 years, he's been making $8, $9, $10, $11 million per year. I think James getting him easy shots has helped show off what he can do on a basketball court. I think he feels a strong connection with James, loyalty to James. Does he actually side with James, or is it just sort of like that's his guy and he's going to go to bat for him? I think that's certainly a question. And to your point, like PJ has admitted he doesn't get up for every January game against the Wizards like he does a playoff game. If you then combine that with the fact that maybe he's in these trade talks, he feels like he might be shipped out. He feels like his boy in Harden is being wronged. I'm not going to say PJ is going to loaf it, but like PJ has to be playing at 120% to be an effective NBA starter. If he's playing at 80%, that might look a little worse than most players' 80%. So we'll see what we get from him.
PJ holding some back is not the same as Joel Embiid holding some back, or it's not the same as our old friend Jimmy Butler holding some back, where they're waiting for the playoffs to go, full defensive effort, full rebounding effort, things of that nature. When PJ is not full effort, it's like that line in Office Space. So what is it you would say you do here?
Right.
There's not really anything because the 3-point volume is so low that he's not even a reliable and credible spacing threat. So
I love Kyle making a 90s reference. It makes me feel slightly less old.
Well, Office Space, that's I feel like that's in your wheelhouse.
100%. Yeah, I lived that life.
That's a great movie if nobody's ever seen it. I don't know how old or young the chatters here are, but good 90s flick with Jennifer Aniston, weirdly enough. Young Jennifer Aniston. So yeah, I think PJ Tucker is a big inflection point at Media Day. We'll see what happens there. There was a question from, I believe, Brandon higher up that I think is a good one. Do you think that James would, if he's still on the team when the regular season starts, do you think James would skip games? Like just say, I think
the traditional route would be to skip games, but I feel like the most damage he could do to the organization is to show up. Yeah. Yep.
And I think that's how James has gotten his way in the past, right? He's gone out on the floor and he's proven to be so destructive on the floor that the teams have been like, well, screw this guy. We don't want him here anymore. It's like he's going to actively...
When your lead ball handler and your primary point of attack defender is playing at 60% effort, it shows real obvious. It is... And also, like, then he can be in the locker room. He could be complaining. He could be talking to the media. There's just so much more pathways for him to be annoying if he's around the team than if he takes the Ben Simmons route, for sure.
We do have at least one chatter, BDJ, who has seen Office Space because they are telling me I am not wearing enough pieces of flair.
Okay.
Which, that's a deep cut.
You
from
do.
That
I have 2 stickers. You have 1, so I'm beating you in the flair. I have 2 PHLY.
2 stickers. I got a watch. I got a ring.
That's not. We're talking about PHLY flair. It's got to be flair related to. In that case, it was a restaurant.
That might be stretching it, but yeah. So anyway, I do think that Harden can be more disruptive.
There is another direct tie into that movie with the David Duke. It was a perfectly fine name until that. That's a little too serious, but works better with the Michael Bolton character.
Michael Bolton much better than David Duke in that context than every other.
He still has to go by Dave. I don't understand why this isn't a thing.
Sixers player David Duke, so we're clear. Anyway, I do think that there's a balance here, right, where Harden can be more disruptive and dysfunctional by being here, but is that going to help him accomplish what he wants, which is future payday, future security, get to the team he wants? Maybe not. That there's a possibility. We've talked about it a lot already. If he's super disruptive and teams are like, well, this guy is just a complete asshole who we can't trust at this point, they might look at it and say, okay, that's Daryl Morey and James's problem to deal with, and say, like, if you're the Clippers have been the big team that has been associated with a potential Harden trade. As we said yesterday, maybe they just say, well, screw this guy. We'll go after Drew Holiday instead, and that's the guy. So I think there is sort of a fine line to walk for Harden between being disruptive enough to get the hell out of Philly,
right,
but I'm not being too disruptive and screwing up my money down the line.
You still need somebody to believe in you. And this is sort of like goes back to our entire debate about Harden. What really is the best way for him to get that next contract? It might be slightly different than the best way to get off of this team.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure he's fully bought into that. I still think there's a part of him that believes I'm James Harden and I'm going to get that money. It's the Sixers' fault for not giving it to me, not my fault. So he might not necessarily have that perspective, but I agree with you. The other component is you need a team, preferably a number of teams, to believe in you and believe in your next contract. I'm just not sure that you're there.
Yeah. So that, I mean, look, there will be a lot of national media people at media day, certainly at training camp. I already know a few of our esteemed colleagues who will be there. They're all interested, just as we are, in how this Harden situation is going to play out. I don't think anybody can say they really know. As we said, you know, we've seen him blow up at press conferences. We've seen him, the fat suit and all that. Well, I don't know that he ever actually put on a fat suit, but it's like it's a figure of speech here. But he's done all sorts of different things to make sure he gets where he wants to go. So I'm curious what the final act is going to be here. I can't imagine there'll be another trade request after this, but I guess I would have said the same thing after he left Brooklyn.
It was interesting in Brooklyn because at first he tried to do like the diplomatic behind the scenes, talk to people, but not outwardly show that he wanted off the team. And then he just stopped caring. Like his effort just completely nosedived. So yeah, it will definitely, he's tried multiple different ways, including, running off to, wasn't Vegas. Where did he run off to before Rockets training camp? I forget. It doesn't matter. But he ran off away from the team.
He was
to party during
Lil
COVID.
Baby, I'm pretty sure. Yeah. I don't know where though.
He's gone about this many different ways. I got to say the whole sign, Daryl Morey is a liar, might be the most creative one. A little childish maybe, or at least a little petty, but maybe the most creative one. It will be interesting to see where this goes from here, for sure. And I guess the other way to sort of tie into that, how does Joel react? And we've seen Joel react with, Ben Simmons. And I thought up until he dropped the meme about going to my friend's funeral, I thought he handled it pretty well and diplomatically. Not saying the meme wasn't handled well. It was just a course correction. But I would expect him to sort of be like, we want him back. We realize this is a business. He's the best version of our team has him. Almost regardless of whether or not that's how he's truly feeling, I just feel like he's going to take that diplomatic route at the beginning.
I'm going to hold that thought for one moment and talk about our good friends at DraftKings Sportsbook, because we're back with another week of football. Birds are 3-0. Go Birds, obviously. Only a couple of days away from their next game. And DraftKings is keeping us in on the NFL action. Great offers every single game day. New customers can bet $5, get $200 instantly in bonus bets. Throw $5 down on any of this week's epic matchups to walk away an instant winner. And DraftKings isn't stopping there. All customers can take advantage of 2 new offers every game day this September. Football's more fun when you're in on the action, so download the app now. Sign up with code PHLY. New customers can bet just $5, get $200 instantly in bonus bets, only on DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NFL, with code PHLY. The crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER or visit www.1800gambler.net. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY 467-369. In Connecticut, help is available for problem gambling. Call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. Please play responsibly. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino and Resort in Kansas, licensee partner Golden Nugget, Lake Charles, Louisiana, 21 plus, age varies by jurisdiction, void in Ontario. See sportsbook.draftkings.com/football terms for eligibility, terms, and responsible gaming resources. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Eligibility and deposit restrictions apply. So,
we've got a very lively debate in our chat right now about blowing it up. They're not trading Joel
they're
Embiid.
not blowing it up.
Again, you can have this as a thought exercise. That's fine. Like part of following a fan is team building and debates. It's just not going to happen. Daryl Morey is not going to trade the reigning MVP unless the reigning MVP demands that he be traded. And even then, he probably kick his feet and see if Joel can change his
I was going to
mind.
say, if we've seen anything based on the Ben and James
it's
situations.
Not happening.
So I want to focus on the Joel point you were just making, Derek. I think the fundamental difference, I know that Joel said most of the right things the first time around with Ben. Certainly the mask slipped a time or two prior to the trade. I think the fundamental difference right now is that Joel is not at all at odds with James. Right? Everything that we've been told is that Joel would be happy and all his teammates would be happy to bring James back. Kumbaya. They're all on the boat together, and they go out there and try to win as many games as possible this year. And so I think that, if anything, the bigger concern and the bigger storyline with Joel heading into training camp and the beginning of the regular season is, what does Joel think about the organization right now and how the organization is handling this? And how much fault does he place on Daryl Morey for essentially saying to James, we have a limit with what we're going to pay you or how many years we're going to give you? Because that has had, I think we would agree, not giving Harden the full max, correct decision. Yeah, that was the right thing to do. But the consequence of it is that the current short-term basketball stuff is bad. They don't have their co-star. They don't know what they're potentially going to be able to turn him into. And so this has had a direct effect on who Joel has to go to war with to start the season. And so Joel has mostly said the right things in the reporting from people like Ramona Shelburne, who's close with Joel and Joel's people. She has indicated, and we have heard from a lot of the same people, that he's on board up to this point. Where's the breaking point, though? And so the first conversation we'll have with Joel on Monday, I think, is really important to get a pulse on where he's at, if he's still campaigning for James to come back or if it's more resigned to his fate that James is leaving. And look, this is even more than James. I think the interesting thing with Joel, you show up to a Joel Embiid press availability and you can think you know what he's going to say. And then sometimes he just goes on a wild detour and says whatever the hell he's thinking at the time. And so that's what I love about covering the guy. I might go in asking for a very basic answer on, what happened in the fourth quarter, and then he goes on a 2-minute tirade on the referees and Nikola Jokic and floppers or Nick Nurse, and we're going to see what he has to think about this whole thing.
And it's going back to sort of like a conversation in there. You look at the other contending teams, like Giannis has Dame to work with. The Suns, look at how stacked they are. Like, they're superstar upon superstar. The Nuggets, maybe they're not quite the same household name, but, Jokic has Michael Porter Jr. and Jamal Murray, and there's just more. It's just different than a Sixers team without James Harden. There's just not the same co-star firepower. And on the one hand, we can sit here and talk about Joel needs to be better. It's 100% true. But it's also true if Joel looks at the roster and goes, I don't have as much help as the other superstars that are contending for a title. You need to get me that help. It's a fair perspective for him to have. I think right now he certainly does have the perspective of he will give Morey time, but you always wonder, well, what does that actually mean? How long until he reaches his tipping point? How he responds, on Monday and throughout the rest of the week when he's peppered with questions about James not being there, if that ends up being the case, will give us a window into how he's really feeling, more so than we've gotten up to this point at least.
And I'll say this too. So Drew Holiday is obviously big point of conversation right now. Joel watches a lot of basketball, right?
Yep.
Like, a lot of our press availabilities are delayed because Joel's sitting at his locker with his phone, watching something on League Pass, studying the game, all that. I think he knows, as good as Drew Holiday is, if Drew Holiday comes here, let's call it 15, 16 games that we assume Joel will probably miss at some point during the season, their odds of being able to win those games without Joel go down compared to if they just had happy Harden. Like, whatever you say about James, he was able to keep them afloat. Him and Tyrese being there as like the foundation on the nights that Joel was not available, that makes a big difference. Having you can just give the ball to James. He might be able to go out there, score 30. I mean, he scored 40 in game one of a playoff series in the second round. So that element you would lose if you're swapping Harden out for whether it's Drew or another player of that caliber. Now, you might have a more harmonious team. You might get some gains on defense. And as I said yesterday, you're comparing a guy who's going to be disruptive and doesn't want to be here to a guy in Drew who's one of the most valued guys in the league in terms of locker room, professionalism, all that stuff. So Drew, for all the things that he is not a second star. And I think Joel, even if he would accept having a guy and, value having a guy like Drew, I think I'm curious to see how he would react compared to having, James Harden, former MVP on the team.
Yeah. Two, I want to highlight two comments sort of from the chat. And again, if you're not subscribed, join us during these live chats. We try to make it a little bit interactive. Brandon B mentioning that Embiid will get a supermax in the future. He's not going anywhere. That's not assurance that he's not going anywhere. It just means he's signing that contract. You saw that with Dame.
Yes.
You can't rest on that as a get-out-of-jail-free card. You still have to build a competitive team around him. Otherwise, he will sign that extension and request to be traded. It's pretty clearly the pathway that superstars in the NBA will take if they have to. Another one from Bill Morris, he's just saying that basically if they wait until they ask out, then you're screwed. It's not really the case. You've seen, again, when superstars ask out, you can get value. The most precious commodity in the NBA, I can speak, I promise, is having that superstar. If he is healthy when he asks out, you will still get value for him. Will you get top value? Maybe not. Maybe there's an extra unprotected pick that you could have gotten if you traded him at the apex of value versus waiting to ask out. But is that one extra draft pick that you can get worth giving up a year, 2 years, 3 years of trying to make a run with an MVP caliber player? You don't get MVPs often. I feel like this goes on, I feel like people take this for granted just because they currently have one. It is tough. Go through the history of the Sixers. Moses, AI, Embiid. There are big gaps in between those. It is real
and then
tough.
Wilt before that.
Yeah, it is real tough to get somebody who actually gives you a chance. So do they have a clear pathway? No. And that's frustrating as all hell. I get it. They should not be in this spot. It kills me that they wasted so many prime chances. But you're waiting for one more stroke of luck, one more player to become available, one more step from Tyrese Maxey, one more draft pick that you didn't expect to be good turning out. You need one more stroke of good luck to give you a real chance of competing with a unique opportunity to have an MVP on your roster. Giving 2 or 3 more years of that up isn't worth one extra draft pick to maximize his value. It's just, and again, this is an academic debate because Daryl Morey would quit, I think, before he would trade Joel Embiid. It's not going to happen. And honestly, it shouldn't happen.
And I want to build off that point, Derek. Even having an MVP, it's still hard to win. Like if you go back just through the Sixers history, right? Julius Erving, when he joins the Sixers, is at that point had a strong case as he's the best basketball player in the world, right? He's a multi-time MVP in the ABA, a champion with the Nets. Comes there, he teams up with George McGinnis, who, again, was one of the best players in the entire ABA. They go to the finals. They lose to Portland in kind of awful fashion. They go up 2-0 and then lose 4 straight. And then they run into a wall for years. Julius is basically human metronome during that time period, right? Where he's putting up 24, 25 a game, 7 rebounds, 5 assists. He had some really
good teammates during that time, too.
Very good team.
Yeah. Daryl Dawkins, Andrew Toney, Mo Cheeks. Very good team, along with one of the best basketball players in the world.
And Moses, separately, is winning multiple MVPs in Houston, and he's not able to do anything. And it's only when they combine these two first ballot Hall of Fame type guys that they're able to win a single championship, one title. And I'm not diminishing that at all, but that is how difficult it is to win one of those with 2 guys who many people would say are all-time like franchise talents, right? And then you go to AI. AI in 2001 has one of the, it's like the season that I remember as a basketball fan growing up as a kid. It's like what got me into the sport. And they go on this storybook run, and people have all this fondness for that season for winning a single game in the finals, and they never came close again, despite having that same guy who was capable of 40-point games, 50-point games against high-level teams in the playoffs. They were lost in the wilderness the second that they traded that guy away, and they didn't emerge from it, frankly, until they got Joel Embiid, and he gave them a floor to start from. And so all that is to say, the second that they tear this thing down, and it'll only be when Joel decides he wants out, they are going to have to wander through the wilderness for a while. And so you do whatever you possibly can to keep a good team around this guy.
Yep. No, I agree. And it's, on the one hand, I think there's fair criticism because you need Joel Embiid. We spent the last 20 minutes of the last podcast saying you need Joel Embiid to be better. When we were talking about, there's 2 podcasts ago, when we were talking about Daryl Morey, if your MVP is not playing at an MVP level in the playoffs, you didn't have a chance. I'm not sure there's much that Daryl Morey could have done to change that. So on the one hand, you need him to be better. On the other hand, he does really need a second, all NBA caliber player alongside of him, and you really need that to be a perimeter scoring threat. Your first column at PHLY was you need Joel Embiid to be averaging 24, 25 points per game. You need a as good or better perimeter scoring threat to play alongside of him that can really facilitate the offense, and that comes down to the fact that Joel Embiid hasn't developed enough as a playmaker, and the Sixers as a team just hasn't done enough with their assets to get the right player around him. And you took a shot with James Harden. I think we've seen over the last 2 years that he doesn't have it all enough left as a scorer and a half-court scorer specifically to put that kind of pressure on the rim that you need him to in order to not only score but create shots for his teammates. So you tried. You gave it your best effort with Harden. But it's a risky effort because that's all the assets you had left. That was you didn't have a perfect, clean solution because you fumbled the bag on so many different number 1 picks and max cap space backup centers and all the other things that we've relitigated a million times. So it's partly on Joe, but it's a lot on team building to the point where now you're desperate. And that just brings us all back to just because it hasn't worked out doesn't mean the best course of action is to get rid of Joe to get one more extra pick out of the trade haul. And again, I'm going to go back to it. Even if you wait 2 years and Joel Embiid asks, demands a trade, you're going to get a lot of value back in a trade because you have Joel Embiid. Unless he, blows out a knee or breaks a foot, which, obviously isn't off the table, but with the way his career has gone, he hasn't really had those catastrophic injuries, knock on wood. It's always been little stuff that pops up in, March, April, and May. Barring that, you will get value back in a Joel Embiid trade. You don't have to time it perfectly. The one sort of caveat I would apply, let's say someone would have traded the number 1 pick in the last draft. Okay, when you're targeting a very specific prospect, maybe that changes my stance on this, but you're not at that point now. You won't be at that point at the trade deadline. So just focus your efforts on building around Joel Embiid. It's not a great path to a title at this point. It should be a lot better than it is, but it is currently your best path.
In an ideal world, one of those high-value draft picks they made after selecting him would have turned into the perimeter guy that they needed to be essentially the end-of-game half-court offense player. And Joel's trajectory changes from, okay, he has to become, Hakeem Olajuwon, basically, for them to win a title. Instead, it could have been he can be Hakeem defensively and then not be the focal point of the offense. If Ben Simmons ever decided he wanted to shoot a ball, if Markelle Fultz's career hadn't gone completely off the rails from basically day one. Those are all inflection points that directly impacted what Joel needed to do in order to try to win games. And he deserves credit for his game shifting and all the changes he's made, moving out to the elbows and doing all these different tweaks so he can be the best offensive player he can be. The reality is, it's hard to win that way as a big man in the playoffs. And so he's still an ultra valuable player that I think can be part of a title winning team. But as it stands right now, they need that guy, whether it's Maxey making a giant leap or they're trading for somebody who can be that guy to supplement him. That's the missing piece right now.
It's sort of what I love about doing a live show, because this was not on our bingo card today.
No.
We did not have this in the rundown, and we've gotten on a 20-minute tangent. But, I think it's something that maybe we have, a large portion of the fan base has felt this way. Certainly immediately after that loss, they felt this way, and there was a lot of argument about that. So it's probably something worth addressing as we go into the season.
Yeah, and we are having some spirited debates in the comments today.
Yeah, I can't even keep up. I've probably been distracted. I haven't heard every word that you said, which isn't that bad. I hear you speak a lot.
That's true.
Because I've been trying to follow along in the chat.
Well, let's take a quick palate cleanse, quick break, and we'll talk about our friends. The Game Time app. Look, buying tickets to your favorite events shouldn't be stressful. I know, especially the Eagles are a really hot ticket right now. We'll see with the Sixers. Certainly, Philly's playoff games are going to be very tough to get. But the Game Time app is a fast and easy way to buy tickets for any playoff game, regular season game, comedy shows, theater, concerts, anything you might want to get to. You go to the Game Time app, they'll be able to help you out. Game Time is the place for last-minute ticket deals, and it's the fastest-growing ticketing app in the country for a reason. You get images of your seat before you buy, so you know exactly what to expect when you arrive. That's honestly probably my favorite part of the Game Time app. You can buy tickets in a matter of seconds. 2 taps, you're set, and tickets are sent directly to your phone, so you never have to dig through your email in order to find those tickets. I know I have problems with service and Wi-Fi as I'm all throughout this city, so getting them directly to my phone, that's a wonderful thing. So snag the tickets without the stress with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, use code PHLY, $20 off of your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code PHLY, $20 off. Download Game Time today. Last minute tickets, lowest price, guaranteed.
We have Tian in the chat saying that the vibe is we are screwed, or at least that's his vibe. That's fine as long as you keep tuning in.
Yeah, I actually had somebody say to me the other day that they hate the team and they love the podcast. So
that works.
Honestly, that's fine with me. If you guys keep tuning in and don't like the team at all, as long as we still keep building this community and family and the chat and through our audio feeds and what have you, I'm happy with that. But I certainly would prefer that all of us had a good basketball team to watch. And so I think some of the other stuff we're going to get to is focused on, I guess, the developments of the rest of the basketball team that is not James Harden and Joel Embiid.
Yeah. I think probably there's been a lot of talk about Paul Reed playing alongside of Joel Embiid. I sort of want to see where Nick Nurse is at with that, because we can talk to him on or off record. We'll do so next week. But does he actually go out and make that a priority early on in camp? Do they run those sets? Is it something where it's all right, well, we'll have Paul come into camp, and if he's shooting well, then we'll give it more time? Or is it something that we're going to try to establish from day one and see whether or not it succeeds or fails? How much of a priority is that for him? Because I do look at it, and they have 3 playable centers right now, which is really weird to say. I feel like for years and years and years, we complained about Trez and Andre Drummond, DeAndre Jordan. Now they have 3 guys who, to varying degrees, I trust for at least small stints on the basketball court and bring something unique, whether it's Paul Reed and maybe his short roll game, or Mo Bamba as sort of like the pick and pop rim protector, and Joel Embiid obviously is completely unique. So is he going to make it a priority to get them all on the court? How does it look? Or is it something where if they just all sort of show a little more in terms of their perimeter game, then he'll put it in there?
So here's one question I have with regards to Paul Reed. How much worse will he be on offense not having James Harden to spoon feed him baskets? I think that's probably an underrated part of why Paul was able to establish that role at the end of the season. And certainly James's trust in Paul at the end of the year is why he was able to establish that role and just win it outright, right? Because as we've talked about, Trez and his relationship with James was part of why, not all of why, but part of why Trez was in the rotation at the beginning of last season. And certainly you saw a lot of frustration from teammates toward Paul Reed at the start. There was a few blow-ups between George Niang and Paul specifically because they fought for rebounds and ended up losing them to the other team.
Which is funny because I kind of wish that George would fight for rebounds.
Fight a little bit more
when his teammate's not involved,
So offensively, I'm interested to see, can Tyrese or can, fill in whatever guard they might get instead of James Harden, develop that chemistry and synergy with Paul to get him some decent looks. Now, you're certainly not running the offense through Paul, so not a huge concern. As you say, the bigger point of intrigue is is Paul going to be able to space the floor?
Yep.
Is Paul a reliable, trustworthy shooter? And frankly, one of the things I'm interested in, Derek, is where are they going to put him? Like, where is his spot? I think, we've seen with Joel, he loves that trail spot as a three-point shooter, even though that's I'd say a lower value shot overall, lower percentage shot for a three-point shooter. Some of that is just how he comes up the floor in transition and settles into that. I would guess they try to stick Paul in one of the corners. It's just an easier shot to take. But I don't know what his offseason repertoire has looked like. And if you leave Paul in a trail spot, it would be difficult for double teams and things. But if he misses it, at least you, in theory, have him back on defense in transition to maybe contest some stuff on the other end.
Yeah, and I think a lot of times when we look at these bigs, we tend to overstate how much they actually space the floor.
Yeah.
Like, we will see a 7-foot guy make an occasional three and go, oh, he's a floor spacer now. Whereas the burden of teams actually giving a shit about you shooting out there is really high. And will you pull that trigger quickly? Will you take it, all of your attempts that you have out there that are open? If not, they will help off you and feel like they can recover. And for the most part, most of these big men don't actually provide much in terms of gravity. Even someone like Mo Bamba's made 38% of his threes the last 2 years on decent volume. He's not really stretching the floor because he's going to pass up as many shots as he takes. It is going to be real tough for a guy in Paul Reed who just really hasn't made any perimeter shots at an NBA level to come in here and space the floor on day one. Like, if he's going to play right now with Joel Embiid, he's probably going to have his defender in Embiid's lap. And he would have to make a pretty monumental leap. Is Nick Nurse willing to give him enough time to prove defenses that he has made that leap, or will he run out of it pretty quickly? I think this is one case where Nick Nurse is going to experiment way more than Doc Rivers ever would. And again, I've been on record on this podcast saying I don't necessarily believe that Paul Reed, I'm not ready to pencil Paul Reed in as a floor stretching four, but I think Nick Nurse is going to give him a much better chance to try.
Yeah, and look, all of this is in service of the whole reason you experiment with something like this and try to give Paul opportunities is because the defensive pairing makes a ton of sense, right? To have those two guys, as Nick Nurse's plan, as far as you and I understand it right now, is that the guards and the wings are going to play a lot more pressure defense, and I think try to funnel things toward whoever their length is. Certainly it's going to be Joel Embiid, but also guys like Paul, guys like Mo Bamba at the rim. And if you have two of those guys on the floor at once, certainly I think Paul is a guy who's athletic enough that he can collapse to the middle of the floor and then, shoot back out to a corner shooter and make sure that that's covered after a guy kicks out on a short roll or on a drive. And so if you can help Joel out with the rim protection, help Joel out with the rebounding, I think that's a big, big deal for them, just to be able to end more possessions cleanly and quickly and get out and run in transition. There's definitely defensive upside there, but you have to make it work in a half-court setting on offense, or none of that really matters.
Yeah, and look, he's made shots, perimeter shots in the G League. Like, he was making 1.5 per game in the G League. He's made 3 in his entire NBA career. And that goes to the point, it's not just can you make a wide-open shot in an empty gym, which is essentially what you're doing in the G League, but can you do it when you have NBA defenders closing out? And if they feel like they can help off you and close out and force you to not take that shot, that's a big step. Is he showing any signs of making that? I think it'll be real interesting. Because that's one thing where you can talk about it all offseason. You can put up a video of you doing it in a Rico Hines run or a gym. Can you do it in the NBA? We won't really know next week, but we'll get some good indications.
Yeah, look, we don't know anything based on... I tell this all the time. I actually grew up with a guy who played in the NBA. He's maybe like 6 years older than I am, something like that. And small role player in the NBA, played at Notre Dame. And then he would come home and do camps and do things like played pickup in our hometown. And he looks like Michael Jordan, essentially.
No, I went to high school with Aaron Gray.
Yeah,
and he would
Matt
look...
Carroll is who I went to my high school.
He looked like the most dominant player I've ever seen.
Oh, it's unbelievable. So these guys leave an NBA floor and they're willing to try things. They're able to try things. And they just dominate lower levels of competition. And then you see them in a game and it's like, well, that guy just stands in the corner and shoots a catch-and-shoot 3 once every 15 possessions. Or in Aaron Gray's case, it's just like yeah, he'll get like 4 rebounds in 10 minutes or whatever it is. So
I remember early on watching Spencer Hawes go through like a shooting drill, and it was like he couldn't miss. And this was like a mediocre shooter, but like in an empty gym, he looked like the best shooter I've ever seen in my life. And you just realize real early on, like all of these guys, it's just a completely different game when there's the pressure and the timing of doing it against defenders.
Yeah, so to that point, probably a good transition into one of the other things that you and I are looking forward to is, who from that group of young guys might actually be able to step into.
We have a comment here about Springer taking Pat Bev's minutes. I would love for that to happen. I'm not sure I'm ready to buy in, but I would love for that to happen because I've said multiple times he can be an impact NBA defender right now. You just need him to find a role offensively that you can live with. I would love, and every team, especially every like contending or championship team, has players who take that completely unexpected jump. That's happened already once for the Sixers and Maxey. They need someone else to take a jump. And for Springer, that's not becoming Tyrese Maxey. That's never going to be his skill set. But if he can show off his defensive skills by being competent enough offensively, that would be a massive win for this team.
It'd be huge.
Massive.
And look, I think if we said this the other day, he's the betting favorite of the young guys that he might be able to establish a role early just because, as you say, he's an NBA level defender right now. And Nick Nurse looks at that and says, I can plug this guy in and I know exactly what I can do with him right now. I think you can put him next to, most of the guys that they're going to play in the backcourt this year. He fits next to guys like Tyrese, certainly, but also Pat Bev and Melton and all these other guys. Now, I don't know how they create in those lineups, but if you want to play just defense first, we're all toughness, all athleticism. I think Jaden has a real chance to stick if he can hit those catch and shoot jumpers. And honestly, it's even less than hitting them early. That'll matter more in the playoffs. I just want to see quick releases. Yep. I don't want to see hesitation. I don't want to see him second guessing himself. Just let it fly, dude. Because, if you're going to get minutes this year, but the team has to believe that you're not going to record scratch in the way that Matisse Thybulle and other guys, even Tobias Harris, who's a much better shooter, the way those guys have in the past. So I think the message from Nurse and Rico and Bobby and these other guys on the coaching staff has to be, we don't care if you miss shots as long as you keep taking them. Yeah. They got to keep his confidence high.
And I've seen a lot of people, readers, listeners, mention that Doc will give young players, or not Doc, Nick Nurse will give young players more rope than Doc. I don't know if that's necessarily true. I do think he will give them more rope in terms of shooting and missing shots. Like, I think they will be more focused on let it fly, whereas Doc maybe, like, if you missed one or two, that might impact your playing time, especially someone like maybe Paul Reed, but also apply to Jaden Springer as well.
Yeah, so Alex is in the chat asking if we'll be potting from Media Day or CSU.
Yes.
We will be back here after Media Day. We will be doing interviews and things at Media Day, and Derek and I will both be at CSU, so we'll be doing some remote broadcasts from there next week. We'll keep you guys in tune with what's happening out in Colorado, whether that's James Harden melting down the arena there or just a bunch of boring stuff. We'll see.
It'd be pretty entertaining if you melted down the arena.
Yeah.
I still have a hard time.
It's going to be exciting either way. I'm interested to see how Nurse sets up and all that, but it's, opinions may vary on what people are in it for.
Yep. All right. I guess before we get to the last couple here, we have to hear from FOCO. FOCO is a leading manufacturer of sports and entertainment merchandise with a product line that includes apparel, accessories, toys, collectibles, novelty items, and more. It's the best officially licensed gear for all sports and fandoms. And with us now squarely in football and tailgating season, it means it's time for overalls, hoodies, hats, sunglasses, bags, everything you need for a game. FOCO has hooked PHLY up and provided awesome pieces for our sets. FOCO always has our back for Philly sports, and they have yours too. Get the best gear around by using the link in our description. For all non-presale items, use a promo code PHLY for 10% off. All right, I guess what's up next on the...
Well, so I would say it's the other young players. I guess Turk would be the other main guy. I know he's a two-way guy.
I had 100% conviction you were going to bring him up.
Well, of course. It's somebody actually said the other day that the fan group for him will be called the Young Turks. I really like that. Shout out to Rod Stewart. Great song from back in the day. So I'm excited to see what Turk looks like at this camp. I would say I'd be more excited what he looks like if they end up trading for Drew Holiday because, as I said the other day, I think someone like that offers Turk cover for what his weaknesses are and allows him to show all his strengths, right? You put a guy who can handle the ball, run the offense for, bench groups and what have you, and Turk can just stand 30 feet away from the basket and launch every single time he has an opportunity.
Yep.
And I do think, look, I keep talking him up, but internally we've heard from people in the organization, they do seem to be a little higher on him than you would expect for a two-way guy, or at least I would say during Daryl Morey's tenure, two-way guys. They bring a lot of people in, but we don't really. It's like, they're a developmental project. They're nice. I think what they saw from Turk at Summer League and what they've seen from certainly having Rico Hines running those games out in LA and having a coach's eyes there on him, what they've seen out there. I think they're bullish on him for now. Now, whether that holds up on an NBA floor, completely different story.
Yeah, and I think with Turk, you've seen this organization actually have pretty decent success using the G League and with these two-way guys. Shake Milton was initially on a two-way deal. Paul Reed was initially on a two-way deal. So they have had success. Certainly of the three guys that they have on two-way contracts now. And again, if you're kind of tuned out throughout the course of the offseason, they now have 3 two-way slots instead of 2. I think he is the one that presents the most upside and the most intrigue. Probably is the closest to contributing, even though he weighs like 115 pounds. And Ricky
It
Council,
is crazy. He's going to need about 100 protein shakes.
I joke, but he's like, 165, I think, was his weight at the combine. So that's going to be tough. But even though Ricky Council has a lot defensively, I think he can contribute almost from day one. The jump shot's so far away that I was really impressed with Turk in terms of his ability to, just contribute in a multitude of ways. Like I said, I think he was a little better of a passer than I was maybe expecting. I think he was a little better in terms of moving his feet defensively. Now he's going to get smashed by every screen that he comes near, but I think he has at least some tools where if you can figure out how to navigate that size and physicality, there is an NBA player in there. I just want to see how it translates to NBA size, speed, athleticism, and physicality.
Well, and certainly in the regular season, by the way, we've seen Joel have plenty of success with guys who can't defend but can shoot the ball. So I would be more concerned about Turk in the high stakes games, playoff games certainly, but also against better opponents. I think giving him minutes against the Detroits, the Charlottes, the teams that are not going to be in the playoffs or even fringe playoff teams, I'm not worried about them. If you juice up the offense around Joel and the spacing around Joel in a regular season context, he's good enough that he can prop you up defensively and make it worth playing guys like Turk in those minutes.
No, you put Turk in the playoffs, and Kevin Huerter is going to post him up relentlessly to the point where you're waiting on Doc to adjust, and he never does. But if you put him in a regular season, you can at least get a gauge of his skill set and how it translates, and whether or not it's worthwhile to make maybe a multi-year investment in keeping him around either on an NBA contract or on a two-way contract to see if he can develop physically. You can at least make a projection on whether or not it's worth that kind of investment. Because traditionally the Sixers, even though they've had these success stories, it's usually one and done. You spend 1 year on a two-way and then you get converted. That's what Shake Milton did. That's what Paul Reed did. I think with some of these guys, Turk and Ricky Council specifically, it might take a year or two to get to the point. You have to determine whether or not they have that kind of NBA upside to make it worthwhile.
Yeah, we did want to get into the veteran guys at the end of the bench at some point. There's a bit of a debate in the chat today about Drew Holiday versus Kyle Lowry for some reason. Look, Kyle Lowry 5 years ago, maybe we could have a discussion here. And I love Kyle, great dude, great leader, all that stuff. If you guys watched him play last year, you would have no illusions that he's got a lot left in the tank.
And in all honesty, Lowry is probably a useful tool to look at and how Drew's next contract might age.
Yeah.
When in his age 33 season, 2019-20, 19.4 points and 7.5 assists, then 17 and 7, then 13-7, and 11-5. That is sort of like the aging curve you're probably looking at with Drew. Now, maybe Drew's a little better in terms of physical tools, like he's a couple inches taller, longer wingspan. He might age a little more gracefully, but you will see that kind of decline. To prefer Kyle Lowry at 37 going on 38 over Drew, who just turned 33. Like, that's, people complain about the Sixers being old. Kyle Lowry would be like properly old. Drew Holiday's just getting old.
Yeah. And again, I said yesterday, Drew is only 33 and doesn't turn 34 until the NBA Finals, essentially. So he's not as old as you might think. Now, that doesn't mean that his athleticism is going to hold up, right? Like all guys age differently, but I do think he's a pro's pro, takes care of himself, and so I would feel okay about giving him his next deal. It obviously depends on what it costs.
Caleb saying Shams is saying that the Sixers were going hard after Drew Holiday. I haven't actually seen that report, but I have no doubt. Like, every piece of intel I've gotten is that they are definitely interested. It's just whether or not they will have the best package to offer.
Yeah. And again, I think the Clippers are the team that scare me probably the most at this point if I'm the Sixers. I think there are issues with the Boston, like how the Celtics would put together that trade package.
They would, and financially, like keeping all four of Drew, Brown, Tatum, and Porzingis, and Porzingis already locked in. He signed that extension this summer. Keeping all four of them around would be very tough while staying under the second apron. Yeah,
and all indications are so far that the Heat are not really in the mix. So if you take the Heat out and say Boston, it's a tough path to getting him, there's only really a couple other teams that want to and can make a real offer for Drew. So I would say I don't think they're the favorites or the outright favorites, but they're in a very small group of teams that I think has a real chance to get him. And I think it might get done one way or another before media day. Like, I think it might be sometime in the next few days.
Yeah, it's certainly a chance. All right, I guess where do you want to pivot? You wanted to talk about
which of the old fogies are going to do anything.
Are we including Mobamba in that group? He's not an old fogey. He's a veteran.
We could amend it to which of the
minimum
1 year minimum guys. What are we going to see from them at camp, number one? I think it's two separate questions, right? It's like, what do these guys have to offer during the season? Yeah. But also, is Pat Bev going to be just chewing people out at training camp and getting in fights with PJ Tucker because they just seem like two guys who have butt heads?
Yeah.
It's going to be fun, man. And look, Danny Green will be Mr. Pacifist and tie everybody together. So they have a decent mix of personalities, at least. But
couple pretty good podcasters in that group.
That's true. Maybe we could convince one of them to come on the show at some point.
Look, individually, I like almost everyone they signed just from a couple years ago. Like, I was probably bigger on Danny Green when he was here than most Sixers fans. I feel like those kind of like catch and shoot shooters who really only shoot and play defense, it's real easy to get annoyed with because even the good shooters miss 60% of the time and even the best defenders get beat a lot. And he was, starting to slow down at that point. But what I saw with Cleveland last year wasn't the most encouraging. Now he's got more time to come off of that injury, so maybe we give him a chance. Pat Bev, I used to really like that pesky defender, but he was so bad offensively that he's tough to really believe in. But they really need him because they need more ball handling on his team, especially unless or until they get Drew. And Kelly Oubre, my God, do they need a little bit of juice and athleticism on the wing.
Yeah, you and I both don't really like Kelly as a general idea. Yeah. But I think on this team, given the lack of length and athleticism they have and lack of true wing players they have, it's going to help to have at least some degree of shot creation from someone who's taller than 6'2" or shorter than Joel 7 feet.
I want to point out, William in the chat said the return of Drew will bring the failed process full circle. The man never should have been gotten rid of in the first place. If you don't trade Drew, you don't have Joel Embiid. Yeah. They traded Drew to lose more games, and that directly led to having enough ping pong balls to get Joel Embiid.
Yeah, look, if they had been able to identify any point guard in the next half decade after they traded him, we're not even having to have this conversation, but things have gone sideways since they traded him on that front. So maybe they need to reacquire him because there's a curse that needs to be lifted.
Look,
you could convince me of that,
fantastic.
honestly.
Yeah. I love Drew. It's just you needed to lose games at that point. Like, losing games wasn't the problem there. It was the 18 failed decisions they made after that point.
Yeah, there are so many different ways that they could have not
It's
screwed
so frustrating.
this up over the
It's so
years, and that's what I'm sure has caused a lot of the anger that we feel each and every day on this show.
And I guess my final question is Kyle Neubeck going to get in a little tuffle here at camp? If you've ever had to deal with Kyle, he is a pain in the ass. He can get under your skin.
Well, it might be, I don't know. Derek and I spend a lot of time together now. And,
that's my final question. Look, we're going to spend a lot of time together this next week. We'll see. If one of us comes back with a black and blue eye, you know what happened.
No punches will be thrown by me. And Derek said he was a pacifist the other day. So I can't imagine anything will go awry. But look, we've had a great time these last, I guess,
3 weeks.
3 weeks. I was going to say 2.5, but that's because I took a vacation the first week
true.
that we were on the job. I've had a blast doing this for last few weeks and getting started here. And now I think we'll start to settle into more of our normal rhythm with, covering practices. We're going to have lots of pre and post game shows after games. That'll start, first preseason game, and we'll go from there. But, thank you to all these people, even the people that are arguing, Bill, Brandon, Will, Casper, Randy, Alex. We have so many people that have been sounding off today. So thank you guys for being here. Hit that thumbs up and the subscribe on the way out. And Derek, I will see you at the practice facility on Monday.
Sounds good.
We all silly like the mayor.